Have you ever played a visual novel where, in order to find happiness with one girl, you have to fully commit yourself to another? This is the sort of madness you can find in White Album 2. Welcome back to OtakuDaiKun, Dai here. White Album 2 is one of the most beautiful visual novels I've ever played, and yet it's also one of the most frustrating. It's an experience designed to tug at your heartstrings and force you into drama you didn't ask for. It's a love triangle from hell, one that cannot be resolved without casting one of two main girls into absolute despair. Despite this, it is captivating, a game that I hold in high regard. The things that frustrate me are done intentionally. The writing is brilliant, but it refuses to give you a conventional narrative with a clear, objectively happy ending. It's for that reason that I want to share my experience with you as a sort of retrospective analysis on how this visual novel made me feel and why it's held in such high regard by the community. If you enjoy this content, be sure to like, comment, share, and smash that subscription bell as if it were your waifu. Consider supporting us by becoming a paid channel member on YouTube or joining my Subscribestar or Patreon. All three platforms offer the same perks, such as early access and exclusive videos like my Lessons in Magecraft series. Without further ado, let's dive into White Album 2. One thing to clear up going into this is that White Album 2 is not a direct sequel to the first game. You do not need to know anything about that first game, as we're introduced to a whole new cast of characters. The connections to that first game are loose, mainly in the form of a couple songs the characters are aware of. It's on a cameo level at best. So what is White Album 2? It's a visual novel developed by Leaf, the same team that brought us classics like Two Heart, Utowarerumono, and Tears to Tiara under the publisher Aquaplus. Its art, done by Takeshi Nakamura, is unparalleled in its gorgeous, expressive characters. Originally, the story was released individually through 3 chapters, but has now since been compiled into a single experience. Despite being over a decade old now, it's only been available in English for the past 2 years thanks to a translation from Todokanai TL, and it's their patch that I'm using to play the game. White Album 2 tells the story of Haruki, a diligent student in his final year of high school. He's a member of the school's light music club, which has become inactive ever since its lead vocalist quit. Wanting to make a lasting memory of his youth, he aims to revive the club just in time to put on a performance for his last ever cultural festival. Too bad he's not very good at playing guitar, and the club's president, Takeya, seems more interested in hooking up with various girls. Haruki needs help, and it comes from 2 unexpected sources. Someone in an adjacent classroom plays the piano after school, and Haruki will play along with them, riffing to pass the time. One day, when playing a popular tune from a few years back, he hears a third person start singing with beautiful vocals. Haruki runs to the school's rooftop, where he meets Setsuna, one of the school's most popular and adored students. He convinces her to join the light music club, and the 2 of them set out to recruit the mysterious piano player. Haruki learns that this pianist is actually his classmate Kazusa Toma, a total slacker with poor grades that sleeps through class. Piano is her passion, as her mom is a world-renowned pianist who she feels has abandoned her in order to pursue fame and fortune. This has left Kazusa a bitter and defensive girl, and yet Haruki's overwhelming enthusiasm wins her over. The 3 of them put on a phenomenal performance at the festival, which goes down in the school's history. My first experience with this game came from a trailer I found on the Japanese PlayStation Store. It featured gorgeous anime visuals set to the game's main theme song, Todokanai Koi, or Unreachable Love. Wanting to know more about this story, I found myself watching its anime adaptation, which was the only feasible way to see it in English at the time. The anime is serviceable. I got very invested in it, and it actually follows the game very closely. However, it only covers the first chapter of the story, ending on a depressing cliffhanger. While I prefer the novel, one could certainly opt to skip its first chapter by substituting the anime instead. Of course, that would involve skipping one of the game's lovely hentai scenes though, which I don't recommend. I mean, the scene in question is still in the anime, but it's not as explicit. That's right, this is an eroge romance where you can pursue routes with various heroines. In that regard, it ain't my first rodeo when it comes to this type of game, but you'd be dead wrong if you think you can approach this one like the others. If the visual novel School Days can teach you anything, it's that being indecisive can get you killed. I've got an entire video about that if you're interested. One of my biggest pet peeves with visual novels is that, despite you having to make choices that guide the narrative, you aren't actually in direct control of the main character. At best, you can only poke and prod the protagonist in certain directions, and hope they behave as you want them to. In School Days, for instance, it's difficult to get the main character not to act like a total asshole, and in a similar manner, White Album 2 never lets you fully dictate Haruki's whims. In fact, for the entirety of the game's introductory chapter, you don't make any choices. It's not until the game's second, or closing chapter, that you finally have an influence over the narrative. Thus, no matter which girl you want to end up with, you have to start that journey in the midst of a major tragedy. As I said before, White Album 2 is primarily a love triangle. Haruki forms a small band with Setsuna as the vocalist, and Kazusa on keyboard and saxophone. Both girls have feelings for Haruki, and prior to the start of the first chapter, Haruki also has feelings for Kazusa. Being such an upstanding student, Haruki would always encourage or perhaps annoy Kazusa into attending class and improving her grades. He's apparently the type of person who puts other people's problems before his own. Even though Kazusa pushes him away and responds with hostility, she actually appreciates having someone care for her, considering how she feels abandoned by her own mom. As such, the two like each other, but neither have the courage to admit it. Haruki writes the main theme song, Todo Kanai Koi, as a confession of sorts toward Kazusa, though it never occurs to her. Setsuna, on the other hand, senses this from a mile away. Ironically, being the vocalist, she has to sing Haruki's veiled confession, but she owns it as her own confession of sorts toward him. The romantic tension and jealousy between the three rise, until their explosive debut at the cultural festival. Their mini-concert is a huge hit, and afterward, Haruki falls asleep in the classroom. Kazusa looks upon the boy's sleeping face and gives him a kiss, keeping her feelings for him bottled up. Setsuna actually witnesses this, but chooses to move ahead with her own romance. After Haruki wakes up, Setsuna confesses, and he accepts her feelings. The two begin dating, but Haruki naively tries to keep Kazusa around as a third wheel. Oblivious to her feelings, Haruki hopes the three of them can be friends forever, and the group celebrates in the winter by visiting a ryokan. Under the falling snow, they share an intimate moment in the hot springs together. Of course, this is torture for Kazusa, who is forced to watch her crush date another woman. Thus, when her mom invites her to travel abroad after graduation, she takes the opportunity, hoping to escape Japan, which has left her in so much pain. When Haruki tries to stop her, he learns how she feels about him, and he too admits he's loved her from the start. Problem is, it's too late. When the two share a kiss, Kazusa is hurt by how Haruki has already learned how to make out from Setsuna. Despite this, Kazusa gives Haruki her virginity, consummating their love for a single night before casting it away forever. In doing so, Haruki stands up Setsuna, whom he was also going to make love to for the first time. Unwilling to lie to her, Haruki tells Setsuna the truth, and she actually forgives him. As she puts it, she already knew Haruki and Kazusa loved each other, and she effectively took him away for herself. The two rush to the airport, where Haruki kisses Kazusa right in front of Setsuna. Yet, kissing is all they do. Kazusa gets on the plane, leaving Japan to be with her mom. This devastates Haruki, and Setsuna tries to comfort him. She offers to love him, almost as a replacement for Kazusa, which only makes things worse. The chapter ends in this unresolved, battered state. Naturally, when I first saw this in anime form, I was pissed. I couldn't believe they would end things like this, and so I looked up the visual novel to confirm that, in fact, it does continue afterward. Having seen these events a second time, now in full novel form, it's even more irritating because of the lack of choices. My one mission from the very start was to pursue a love with Kazusa, and if I had it my way, I never would have accepted Setsuna's confession the night of the festival. One of the things this story explores is the nature of love and what it means to love someone. It presents this idea that, even though he's in a relationship with Setsuna, Haruki is still in love with Kazusa, which is a curse that plagues the entire story going forward. However, I think this game's philosophy differs from my own, in that love without commitment isn't real love. While there's no doubt that Haruki has feelings for Kazusa, his claim to love her starts out as an ideal. He's imagining what a life with her would be like without actually pursuing it. This idea of todokanai koi, or unreachable love, is false, because he didn't even try to reach for it. Personally, I don't believe in soulmates or destiny. I don't think there's any one person for anyone. Rather, it's possible to build a valid love with anyone you have feelings for. The process of committing to and constructing that bond is just as important as the feelings themselves. When people get married, that phrase, through sickness and in health, exists for a reason. People change, their feelings change, but part of love is choosing to make those changes in tandem with someone else, to take that step into the future together. Certainly, it's not healthy to stay committed to a relationship that becomes toxic, dangerous, or resentful, but loving relationships need strength to endure, even when all that lovey-dovey stuff takes a back seat. In that regard, Haruki should have held out and confessed his love for Kazusa instead of entering a commitment with Setsuna prematurely. That's not to say he couldn't have legitimately chosen Setsuna and stuck with her, even with his feelings for Kazusa. We develop feelings for people all the time, and without integrity, we could live our entire lives being pulled from one whim to the next. For example, while I'm committed to my wife, I can acknowledge that perhaps on other timelines, other universes if such a thing were real, I could have wound up with someone else. I'm sure that if I put my all into that relationship, it would be just as beautiful, relative to the me in that timeline. However, for the me that's with my current love, I wouldn't betray it for the world. It's just strange how things change. I had a girlfriend in high school, and while I was dating her, I did so with the intent to marry her. Unless you're just trying to hook up, I think most people start dating with hopes for the future, even if they don't speak them out loud. Your desire and intent to make a relationship work is just as important as the instinctive feelings that bring people together. Thus, until Haruki makes up his goddamn mind and commits to either girl, his so-called love will simply be a whimsical dream. Anyway, back to the game itself. The second chapter, also called the closing chapter, begins with Haruki attending college, the very same college that Setsuna also attends. In the aftermath of the first chapter, Haruki has kept Setsuna at a distance, unable to reciprocate her feelings after cheating on her. For me, that was a good thing. As someone wanting to pursue Kazusa, I saw this as a proper chance to cut things off with Setsuna before she gets hurt any more than she already has. Maniacally, however, this is not what the developers have in mind. Turns out, Kazusa doesn't make a single appearance during the entire chapter. You do get to see her, but she and Haruki never interact. Instead, Haruki is actually tempted into plot routes with 3 entirely new girls: his classmate Chiaki, his coworker Koharu, and his boss Mari. I'll admit that Chiaki is absolute fire. She's mega sexy, and her route is fun as hell, but during my first playthrough, I couldn't believe this game had the nerve to take Kazusa away from me and then try to derail me with a bunch of new chicks. As such, I refused to fall for their trap. Until I saw Kazusa again, I was going to play damage control, to steer Haruki away from any other commitments. This made the second chapter a bit of a slog. At best, it was like a filler arc, and at worst, it was like Leaf trying to gaslight me into betraying Kazusa. Thankfully, I'm stubborn, and I found a small outlet to express my conviction. You see, Haruki starts out working as a journalist. By staying keen on the latest news, he remains in the loop regarding Kazusa and her performances overseas. She's earning fame, just like her mother did, and so when it comes time to publish an article on her, Haruki takes the opportunity. Having known her so intimately in high school, he's able to write a piece that truly stands out from the mainstream message. Some might consider his words to be blasphemous, almost like a slander piece, but he writes truthfully in order to honor her. It paints her as an ordinary girl, one we can understand beyond just idolizing her as a prodigy. This actually impresses Kazusa's mom, Yoko, who can tell how much he cares about her daughter. Luckily, Yoko happens to be putting on a concert in Japan, and she sends Haruki a ticket to attend. We later find out that this is her ploy to reunite him with Kazusa, as her daughter's seat is right next to his. I figured this would be the case, and so I very much looked forward to attending. Again, however, the devs had something else in mind. Not just that, they were trolling me. On the night of the concert, we're given a choice on whether to attend or not, but in a cruel twist. The option to actually go is grayed out and unselectable. Generally, when you see an option grayed out in a visual novel, it's there to indicate that you haven't met the prerequisites to make that choice. In a game like Persona, it can be something like not having the proper courage stat at the time. Other times, it means you don't have a close enough relationship with someone. In White Album 2, grayed out choices mean that you either need to complete one of the other endings first, or you chose something wrong leading up to this moment. As such, you'd be tempted to reload an older save file and try something new. In this one instance, however, it is 100% impossible to go to that concert. The choice will never become available, no matter what you choose prior, even after completing everything else in the game. Instead, you're forced to have Haruki rekindle his relationship with Setsuna. To be fair, Haruki treats her like crap, purposefully avoiding her at the start of the route. To an extent, Setsuna accepts this as her punishment for having stolen him from Kazusa. However, your other friends from school, Takeya and Io, work to set Haruki and Setsuna up again. Slowly but surely, the two become close and establish yet another commitment toward each other. Haruki picks up the guitar again, and Setsuna sings alongside him as a duo. It genuinely seems that the two of them can move forward, untethered by their high school days. This route with Setsuna is the only one that actually leads to the game's final chapter, Coda. While this isn't what I wanted, I knew I needed to endure if I wanted to reach Kazusa's true ending. But at this point, it definitely did seem like an unreachable love for me as a player. This isn't to say Setsuna is bad in any way. No, she's lovely. While in high school, she was seen as an idol of sorts among her classmates, but in truth, she's a humble girl with a close, happy family. As you date her, you get really close to her mom, dad, and little brother Takahiro, who looks up to Haruki. While the dad can be strict, the whole family welcomes you as one of their own. The nights you spend talking to Setsuna over the phone, reconstructing their broken relationship, it's all extremely sentimental. It would have been perfect if I were actually trying to go down her route. That leads us to Coda, where we finally reunite with Kazusa again, unexpectedly. As part of a working vacation of sorts, Haruki and Setsuna travel to France, and on the night he plans to propose to Setsuna, he runs into Kazusa in the snow. She's hopeless, having broken her shoes and choosing to walk around barefoot in the freezing cold. Haruki helps her back to her hotel, once again bailing on his date with Setsuna. To further complicate things, Kazusa is scheduled to hold 2 different concerts in Japan as a sort of homecoming. During her stay, Yoko recruits Haruki to be her escort, and he uses this time to interview her exclusively for his job. While this should be a professional obligation, Haruki chooses to keep this a secret from Setsuna, putting all the commitment he's made to her over the years to shame. He feels like crap about this, and on the night of Kazusa's concert, he instead hops on a train to intercept Setsuna at a hotel several hours away in Osaka. There, he admits he's been exclusively with Kazusa for the last 2 weeks, and while it is good for him to get this off his chest, he's telling her this while he's missing the concert. He's been supporting Kazusa, psyching her up for this moment, only to ditch her on the big night. Even Setsuna realizes how messed up that is, and she urges Haruki to get back on the train and rush to the concert. This is a pivotal moment in the game, because if you stay with Setsuna at the hotel, you wind up having sex with her, and then finally proposing. Since this is the exact opposite of what I wanted, I took her advice and tried to see the concert, only to be late by several hours. Feeling betrayed and abandoned yet again, Kazusa goes into a rage, breaking things and crying her heart out. By the time Haruki gets back, Kazusa has gone missing. After looking for her all throughout the city, you get the idea to go back to her old house, which is now up for sale. Sure enough, Kazusa had broken into her own home and is hiding out in the cold. She's not at all happy to see Haruki. She first left Japan because of how much it hurt her, and for his sake, she decided to give it one more shot, only for him to remind her just how painful it was. She's convinced Haruki will never commit to her, and so instead, she begs for him to stay with her until her next concert. Even if he has to pretend, she wants him to love her for the next few days. She wants to play out the fantasy she never got to have, even if it's a total lie. It's at this moment that we are locked into Kazusa's route. Now it's only a matter of going down her normal ending or her true ending. I obviously wanted the true ending, but this choice was made especially difficult for how poorly worded it was. I was given the option of letting go of her hands or turning my face away from her. What the hell did that even mean? If I let her go, that sounds like refusing her idea, but so does looking away. Neither option is a clear yes or no, but I suppose if you think like a predator, Haruki looking away isn't a no, so I guess that's him accepting the idea. The other huge problem was that, even if I wanted to, the option to let go of Kazusa was grayed out. This seemed like a bad omen, so I looked up a spoiler-free guide, only to discover that you need to pick option 1 to go down Kazusa's true ending. Why was it grayed out? I'd been nothing but faithful to Kazusa, considering her feelings even when she was gone for the entire second chapter. Where did I go wrong? Rather than proceeding to Kazusa's normal ending, I backtracked a bit to see what it would take to make option 1 available, and what I discovered was shocking. The reason I couldn't select option 1 was because I had chosen to rush back home to try and catch Kazusa's concert. The game wanted me to stay with Setsuna, which, as I already mentioned, means sleeping with and proposing to her. In order to proceed with Kazusa's true ending, I needed to make the ultimate commitment with a different girl. How does that work? Well, logistically, it's not just because you get engaged to Setsuna. If you stay the night at the hotel, you take a more leisurely train ride back home. During this time, Haruki whips out his laptop and starts listening to the audio recordings he's taken of Kazusa so that he can write his article on her. He notices that, at the end of one of the files, Kazusa had taken the recorder during his sleep and left a special message for him. It's a self-deprecating confession, in which she anticipates being rejected. Why would he ever choose her when she has Setsuna? Even so, during the 5 years they've been apart, she hasn't stopped thinking about him. Knowing she can't have him, she vows to make her performance the best ever, as if to send him and Setsuna off with a bang. It's a touching moment in the game for sure, but certainly nothing that had any sway in my intentions. As someone already committed to Kazusa from the start, her message didn't tell me anything I didn't already know or assume. Problem is, this game isn't about me. It's a game about Haruki, and this stupid idiot apparently needed to hear this message before finally making up his mind. Since he's too rushed and panicked to find this message if he tries to catch the concert, the only way he gets to hear it is if he also happens to propose to Setsuna the night before. The devs have set us up for tragedy. So yeah, I bit the bullet, choosing to stay with Setsuna, completely blowing off the concert. The rest still follows with Haruki finding Kazusa in her old house, devastated by the betrayal. She still asks him to pretend to love her for a time, but by choosing to let her go as she begs to be with him, Haruki admits he can't lie to himself like that. Kazusa takes this as a rejection, a breakup, but this time also gives Haruki the chance to realize he doesn't want a fake relationship with her, he wants a real one. This choice is reinforced when he learns that Kazusa's mom has a disease that is expected to kill her soon. In fact, this disease is why she's come back to Japan. Yoko wants to be in her home country when she dies. Sadly, by this point, Kazusa has grown to fully rely on her mom, and in order to be there for her, Haruki promises to stay with her legitimately. Of course, doing this means canceling the engagement with Setsuna, which is excruciating. Throughout this entire game, we've fully committed ourselves to Setsuna and her family. It's what our friends want, and by all means, it's the most rational thing. However, by choosing Kazusa this late in the game, Haruki is forced to peel that band-aid off in the most agonizing way. Haruki is disowned by his friends, including Takeya, who's normally a total playboy. Setsuna's parents tell him never to show his face again, and her little brother lands a punch or two. Because Haruki plans to leave the country with Kazusa, he cuts ties with his job, which was truly shaping up to be a reliable career. His coworkers are devastated. Everyone dear to him is devastated. Even Yoko admits that this is an objectively poor choice, though it's not like she's going to stop him or anything. By far, the worst part of this route is hearing Setsuna's screams as you suddenly break things off. This entire game, I'd been trying to keep my distance from her, knowing that the closer they got, the worse it would be. Time after time, Haruki had declared his love for her, and even though Kazusa was always on their mind, she sincerely trusted that Haruki would choose her. The game has you relive these tender moments, just to remind you of everything Haruki has abandoned. In her trauma, Setsuna denies his rejection, and you have to traumatize her all over again when you finally arrange to leave the country. It's the ultimate gut punch, and the only thing softening the blow is the fact that this is Haruki's fault, and not necessarily mine as the player. I never would have let it get this far, and that makes it easier to enjoy the payoff when Haruki and Kazusa finally get together. There's still a bit more drama though. In desperation, Setsuna asks Kazusa to stay in Japan. They could be a trio like they used to, which Kazusa affirms would never work out. She blames herself for taking away Setsuna's happiness, and so she tries to atone by using a broken glass to disfigure her hand, giving up her ability to play the piano. Luckily, Setsuna would never allow for that and puts a stop to the self-harm. Later that night, Setsuna almost lets herself get hit by a car. She turns out to be okay, but chooses to spend her night revisiting all the places she's been with Haruki. When her parents freak out, unable to find her, Haruki tracks her down, missing out on Kazusa's last concert in Japan. Setsuna finally accepts her loss. Both Haruki and Kazusa were willing to throw away everything they had to be with each other. Setsuna, on the other hand, can't bring herself to abandon her home, her family, or her friends. Even though he missed the concert, Haruki and Kazusa came to an understanding that even if they're apart, they're always acting with each other in mind. With that trust in hand, they take off on an airplane. After the credits, they're seen staying at a hotel in Germany. Haruki has become Kazusa's manager, handling all the administrative matters. Eventually, they get a message updating them on what's been going on in Japan. Most important is that Setsuna has taken up playing Haruki's old guitar and is also singing again. Despite being rejected, she has the courage to stand up all on her own. Given this ending was my goal all along, there was a sense of satisfaction to finally reaching it. That said, it's a very strange ending that doesn't feel as rewarding as I hoped it would. For one, Kazusa's true ending doesn't have any hentai scenes, because the two of them vowed not to consummate their love until after they've actually left the country. That had me wondering where her hentai scenes actually were. I knew the game had them. I'd seen the CGs online ages ago, so where were they? In a cruel twist, the devs decided to put all of the juicy stuff into Kazusa's normal ending, which really shouldn't be called that when you know the outcome. It's completely, utterly depressing, and you would have every right to consider it a bad ending. This is the ending the game tried to funnel me into by accepting Kazusa's desire to live a lie. In the time between her two concerts, Haruki pledges himself to her, and they completely immerse themselves in passion. Behind Setsuna's back, they make love multiple times, before leaving the city entirely to go on a mini vacation. Kazusa's supposed to be practicing for the concert, but she blows it off to take him to the old ryokan where they once stayed after graduation. When the innkeeper assumes they're a married couple, Haruki goes along with it, and while they have sex in their room, the two hold an informal marriage session.
私、お前の妻なんだよな。
It had me in tears, more so than in the true ending. Just as it seems like everything's going to be alright though, it's Kazusa who decides to pull the plug on their fantasy romance. She takes it upon herself to break up with him, believing that as soon as reality kicks in, Haruki won't be able to abandon his current life. She thinks he'll be crushed under the weight of what he's left behind, and so, for his own sake, she musters up the courage to prove she'll be fine on her own. Kazusa makes this last concert her parting gift to Haruki, and it winds up being her best performance ever, her way of saying that she'll find a way to live without him. For once, Haruki actually attends this concert, sitting beside Setsuna, and during the intermission, he comes clean about the sexcapade he'd just been on. Yet again, she tries to forgive him, but he can't forgive himself. After the credits roll, sometime later, we see Haruki and Setsuna starting to rekindle their broken relationship. She pitifully accepts that the one she loves most only loves her as second best. In that regard, this can't really be called a Kazusa ending at all, though it does seem like she does well for herself going forward. This is a game that seemed hell-bent on keeping me from the one girl I wanted most. Even when you finally get her, it's only after hours of excruciating sorrow and betrayal. What sick, twisted Shakespeare would approve of this? I began to think about what Setsuna's endings were like. How much simpler would this all have been if I just chose the girl the game kept pushing me toward? Turns out, a lot simpler. Sure, there are obvious points in the plot where Haruki and Setsuna have their doubts, where their history with Kazusa drives a rift between them, but it's something they keep overcoming. Between the two girls, Setsuna's route is easily the path of least resistance. At first, it behaves just like Kazusa's true ending, with Haruki rejecting her. He learns about her mom's illness, but instead of vowing to support Kazusa in her mom's stead, he teams up with Setsuna to teach her how to support herself. In that endeavor, Setsuna pulls out all the stops, confronting the bad blood between them. Setsuna vows, as a friend, to help out, and assures Kazusa that Haruki hasn't abandoned her just because he won't love her romantically. After lots of persuasion, Setsuna gets Kazusa to agree to produce a bonus CD to accompany her magazine, one that'll feature tracks performed by the three of them. Their little high school band gets back together again, pulling off what is essentially a miracle in the recording business. The process of getting Kazusa to come to terms with her rejection is painful, for sure, but it's a lot less heart-wrenching with everyone else there to comfort her platonically. Taking care of her sick mom becomes a new goal for her, something else she can focus on besides romance. This leaves Haruki and Setsuna to embrace their love guilt-free, accompanied by some wholesome hentai scenes. The credits show their wedding, as well as a very content Kazusa looking after her mom in the hospital. It is, in all respects, a happy ending for everyone, the kind of ending I wanted for Kazusa, but the scenario never let me have. Instead, the creators designed her happiness so that it only comes through betraying and hurting others. I'm starting to think I'm cursed. The girl I choose in visual novels is often the most troublesome one. This mimics the experience I had with another novel called Kara no Shoujo, a murder mystery horror trilogy. I played the first game, going for one girl named Toko. To be fair, she is the poster girl for the game, but in her true ending, she gets kidnapped by the murderer. Without spoiling the second chapter too much, let's just say things aren't great when you find her again. Sometimes an author is just dead set on writing a tragedy. In White Album 2's case, I can't say I hate it. The emotional roller coaster was extremely compelling and well written. It's just frustrating never getting the chance to do things my way. Instead of succumbing to the philosophy of Todokanai Koi, I would have nipped this in the bud, going all carpe diem, seizing the moment by confessing to Kazusa from the very start. That would have made for a very different story than what the writers wanted to create, though, and I can appreciate this novel for what it is. To leave us off, I want to ruminate on two questions. First, how does this game define love? Is love a feeling, one that can constantly linger in your heart, sabotaging your own rational actions? To an extent, yes, but I'd argue such impulses are only a small part of what love really means. The feelings are a mere spark, followed by a flame that can only be maintained through conscious effort and commitment. There's a great video from YouTuber Breadbox that asks our second question. Are either Setsuna or Kazusa's endings more meaningful? He leans on the side of Kazusa's ending, arguing that it takes more commitment to throw everything away for someone you love, even though Setsuna's ending is much happier all around. I tend to disagree. I feel that Setsuna's true ending is so pleasant due to Haruki being mostly consistent about his feelings for her. His already existing commitment, which had been built throughout the entire game, lends itself to a happy ending because it was earned. Kazusa's end, on the other hand, feels like it was stolen. Had Haruki chosen her from the very start, had he been building his commitment to her this entire time, nobody would have needed to abandon anything. I'd argue that would have been more touching than the ending we got. Still, both girls' true endings are equally valid, equally loving. It's just that Setsuna's happy ending was achieved more responsibly. It's insane how much I have to say about these two girls, considering there are still 3 other girls to cover. Of them, I had the pleasure of finishing Chiaki's route, and it was one hell of a ride. I mean, who else would drop everything on Christmas Eve, showing up to your apartment in a Santa costume for a night of mind-blowing sex? That said, I feel I've spoken my piece about this novel on the whole, though. I really just wanted to focus on the 2 main girls, and I feel I've accomplished that. White Album 2 is one of those stories that will stick with me years from now. It's an experience I think every anime fan should have, even though it's not designed to be happy in a traditional sense. For as annoying as it is seeing Haruki sabotage his own life, I have to admit that the drama he gets into is way more compelling than had I been in control the whole time. So what do you guys think? Have I convinced you to check this out for yourself? Which girl would you have pursued? Do you know any other visual novels that have affected you like this does me? I look forward to reading all your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching!
If you enjoy this channel, help us grow by liking, commenting, sharing the video, subscribing to OtakuDaiKun, and
most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of our anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content.
you can support us directly through Patreon, Subscribestar, or our YouTube membership, all of which come with benefits like exclusive vids and early access.
As always,
Celebrate your fandom!
I want to give a special shout out to all my $10 and up supporters. Video Gamer 75, Elise Trash for Skinko, Dante Pendragon, Stephen Elak, Samuel Gersten, The Nonchalant Ostrich, Otaku Mom, Jens Bauman, Mystic Samurai 1983, Lord Omagoden, Freebrick, Olympian Doll, RNGer Shuffles 1498, Alexis Yukio Gomez Yamato, Link Pendrago, King Kobo, Observer Bellis, Flash Daniel, James Hewitt, Uncanny EXP, Andre Foster, Jared Kraus, Zero Effort, Game King 352, Caitlin P, Vladimirovna, Succubus Sakura, Jonathan Padua, The Taz 96, Maxwell's Demon, President Irina Vladimirovna Putina, Kengo X 77, SF Giants fan Mike, and Akakaze Yume. Thank you all so much.